Shane Beamer's group once again, or number 18, finding themselves in the top 20 of the recruiting rankings for South Carolina. But Beamer also boasting some important adds in the portal. I'll call him another option at quarterback and Aaron Nolan, and not a whole lot of talent leaving. So if we're looking at this South Carolina group, Andrew, how do you evaluate this offseason haul?
I love what they're doing, right? I think they had 4 prospects that moved into the top 247 in our final rankings update. They're getting guys that are, starting to play their best football at the right time. And to me, when I look at this recruiting class, I think South Carolina is addressing one of the biggest needs for the program, and that's a true wide receiver one. When I watched Lenora Sellers this past season in the Gamecocks, they struggled at that wide receiver position. They're losing Joshua Simmons, tight end, who led the team in receiving yards, receiving catches, and receiving touchdowns. Someone must step up. Mazio Bennett, I like him. I think he's more of a complementary piece. I don't know if he's a wide receiver one, but I look at this recruiting class. Malik Clark, Cooper, I love him. Donovan Murph reclassifies, excellent at the Under Armour All-American game. Those are 2 big framed wide receivers with some speed that can win on the outside. They also get Brian Rowe, Lex Cyrus. 4 4-star wide receivers. I like that because Lenore Sellers needs weapons, and Aaron Noland is eventually going to need weapons.
Forgot about Nicholas Harbor too, right? That former 5-star. It's time for him to grow up. We gotta take the training wheels off of Nicholas Harbor. But what South Carolina did to complement what Andrew talked about via high school and what they've done in the transfer portal, he brought up Aaron Nolan. He brought it up with Clemson. Clemson is very diligent with their quarterback offers. That was one of the guys that they had offered out of high school. South Carolina being aggressive here, going to find the heir apparent to Lenora Sellers, who's probably done after this season. Obviously a guy who's going to continue to see his stock rise just with the caliber of athlete that he is and the play that he's been putting on tape as well. So they add Aaron Nolan, the piece at quarterback, but they also add Rasul Faison, maybe one of my favorite players in the entire transfer portal. He comes over from Utah State, coming off of a 1,100-yard season, and Rocket Sanders was such a big piece for them, especially in the ground game. So I like what South Carolina's done. I got to give some praise to what they've done on the defensive side as well. Brandon Sissy, they get from NC State, maybe one of the more position-versatile secondary defenders. And Drew, another guy. How about Gabriel Brownlow-Dendy as well? Justin Okonkwo, they bring over from Alabama. So they've done some really nice things. And Jalen Brown, I want to mention, this is a guy that we were really high on coming out. Signed with Missouri, played less than 40 snaps last season as a freshman. What South Carolina has been able to do with their edge development at that pass rushing position, now you get a guy like Jalen Brown who's going to have some more opportunities next season. I think this is a high upside acquisition that not a lot of people are talking about, but that could serve huge dividends for Shane Beamer and company. So the way that these teams, we talked about it, they're improving, getting better and better each year in terms of how does the high school side service and then how does the portal side service in terms of how do we balance short-term, long-term expectations.
You said Nick Harbor needs to take the training wheels off. What does that mean to you?
It means that when he came out, me personally, I thought he was a defensive end. And that means that when you're talking about a player that has his type of size, athleticism, runs the way that he does, as a junior had 17 sacks, he could reach 3/4 of his potential at the collegiate level, and he'd be in the conversation for the number 1 pick in the draft. Instead, he wanted to play offense. Now, South Carolina had to get him there. So what happens when you're dealing with these type of players that are that caliber, you're going to have to tell them whatever they want to hear. That being said, Nicholas Harbor is playing offense. He obviously has to balance his track and field resume as well with what's going on there at South Carolina. But this is a guy that was not a natural pass catcher. He's a vertical field stretcher. He's going to have to settle in, and this is year 3. It's time for him to make a jump, right? He is a big body that has all the physical traits in the world to be really, really successful. And Andrew talked about it. There's a void there. They need him to somehow find a way to find a niche to impact this team offensively, and I think he's more than capable of doing it. I want to see if he's got it in him.
I think it's safe to say South Carolina outplayed their expectations from last season. Now they're going to have them going into this season. But when you look at the talent that they have, where do they stack up in the SEC? Is this a contender here?
I think they might be still a year away, right? Okay. But it is headed in the right direction. Me and Cooper were talking about that. Shane Beamer wasn't too long ago. Hey, is he the guy for South Carolina and how they've acquired talent? We talked about the wide receiver position. How about the pass rush, right? Dylan Stewart. We've just talked about South Carolina for 5 minutes. We didn't bring up Dylan Stewart. Had one of the best freshman campaigns out of anyone in the country. South Carolina last year tied for 10th nationally in sacks, 41 of them. They're bringing it, like you said, through the transfer portal. Some of these guys, big boys up front that can get after the quarterback. But that is the strength of the high school recruiting class as well. Donovan Darden, excellent at the Shrine Bowl. Our guy Hudson Standish went out there to see him. He said he was the best guy all week in practices. He had a pick 6 in the actual game. He moves up into the top 247. They got Joquavius Dodd, Christian Ingram, Anthony Addison, Josh Smith. All these guys are front 7 players. They might not be 4 stars, but I bet one of them is going to hit because that's what Shane Beamer's been able to do there in Columbia. So I like South Carolina and the direction this thing is headed. Again, Lenora Sellers, he was great, right? He's going to be great probably again here in 2025, but they got a quarterback, a plan for the future, if something were to happen to him. So I like how this roster is coming together because you can see the plan, you can see the vision. It makes sense.
Can I make one more point? This is a huge opportunity for Shane Beamer, his staff, coming off the season that they had. They have to keep the foot on the gas pedal when it comes to talent acquisition because now they have established themselves in the SEC East. You got Tennessee with Nico. You got Florida with DJ. This is a team now with Lenora Sellers. You got probably one more year of him. You got to capitalize. And by all intents and purposes, we've seen them do that. But if they can not only capitalize on the field, the success that they have on the field and what that can do for them down the line is a really big kind of 12-month opportunity for him here.
I said this on the 105 last week. Rodney Dunham, number 2 edge in 2026. This time next year, we're going to be sitting up here talking about him. South Carolina, the early crystal ball leader. That to me is notable. All right, they are reloading and they're getting some really premium playmakers. Rodney Dunham is one of the guys I feel the best about right now in the next recruiting cycle. Shane Beamer appears to already be in the driver's seat.
Yeah, he's been continually stacking talent. That's why when we're talking about a Nick Harbor, a 5-star from last class, but we're talking about how great this class is right now. So if you want to read up more on everything happening at South Carolina, check out our friends at thebigspur.com. They have you covered for all things